side of the monkeys to funnel the monkeys between them. And then there's the most experienced and smartest chimp, known as the ambusher, and his task is to get even further ahead. He usually figures out where the chimps are flushing the monkeys, and then he'll pick a tree ahead, hide and wait, and as the chimps chase the monkeys through the trees, the blockers will funnel the monkeys into running between them, and of course, if they leap right into the ambusher's tree, then it's basically game over. And of course, chimps have quite often been seen taking as many as 7 to 8 monkeys in one hunt. And of course, once they've made a kill, the whole group join in to share in the meal. Of course, they quite often supplement the meat with a few leaves, just like humans take vegetables with our meat. I mean, while meat hunting with chimps might look gruesome, the protein in the meat is a vital part of a chimp's diet and helps fuel those big brains. But also, as I mentioned earlier, chimpanzees can be cannibalistic. I mean, that's usually only happens with rival chimps when they quite often attack rivals that enter their territories or raid their food. It's not entirely understood as to why chimps will cannibalise their dead rivals. I mean, it could simply be a chance for extra protein. It's actually believed that we share between 95 to 98% of our DNA with these animals, because I mean, Charles Darwin, who was the greatest naturalist and biologist who's ever lived, he actually based a lot of his theories on evolution from studying chimpanzees. And of course, people who've gone to see chimps in the wild quite often say that it feels weirdly prehistoric and like they've just been transported back in time. That's all down to the fact that humans and chimps share a common ancestor. They're our closest living relatives. And if you look at a human and a chimp side by side, you'll see everything from their facial expressions, their gestures, their body language. Everything about them seems so human. But this being our closest cousin, it's even more of a tragedy that chimpanzees are now at risk because of us. Chimpanzees are now classed as endangered. There are many reasons for that. The first one is habitat loss. We are taking the forests they rely on, cutting and burning them down to make way for plantations, farms and towns. But of course there are also other sinister reasons. I mean, the worst for me is the pet trade, because quite often young chimps are stolen from the wild to be sold through the illegal pet trade. They're sold as exotic pets to circuses, disreputable zoos, rich man's private collection, or labs to be experimented on, or even worse, for tourists to have their photos taken with. And quite often, when the cute youngsters turn into strong and aggressive adults, they're either abandoned or mistreated. In fact, there's actually a primates rescue centre in Dorset called Monkey World. And during the 1980s, they actually rescued a chimpanzee from Spain called Charlie, and before he was rescued, Charlie was horrifically abused by his owner, because when they found him, he was a drug addict, having been given vast amounts of a relaxation drug to keep him calm and under control. He had all but 3 of his teeth pulled out. He had cataracts, fractured feet, machete wounds to his head and a broken jaw. And of course, the photographer was imprisoned for what he did, but Charlie was taken to Monkey World, where he spent the rest of his life very happily. And of course, the worst threat to chimpanzees is the trade in bushmeat. While much of the trade is legal, hunters are also taking chimpanzees, which is not illegal. This meat is then taken to markets and sold as food. While that's not just harmful to the chimps, it's also harmful to people because many life-threatening diseases can pass between us. But of course, I have very little sympathy for those who get the diseases from chimpanzee meat because they brought it upon themselves. They don't know any better, and they shouldn't be using chimpanzee meat in the first place. But there is hope for chimps. I mean, with tourism, tracking them down with cameras rather than guns, but also building up breeding populations in captivity, because if we want to see our closest cousin through to the future, we need to find ways to protect them. Of course, here is the range of the chimpanzees. In fact, one of the best places in the wild to see them is here in Uganda. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably the rarest and most threatened member of the dog family. It is the Ethiopian or Abyssinian wolf. Now, the Ethiopian wolf, as its name suggests, lives in Ethiopia in East Africa, where it is endemic, which means it's found there and nowhere else on Earth. And it's a very different animal to its grey wolf cousin. I mean, for one thing, the muzzle is a lot longer and thinner to get into cracks and crevices. Its teeth are smaller and more spread out than they are on a grey wolf. But the biggest difference between them and the grey wolf is how they hunt. Ethiopian wolves do live in packs, but they hunt on their own. Because where they live in places like the Bale Mountains, there's nothing up there like as big as an elk, a moose or a bison that needs to be brought down by the whole pack working together as a team. And a lot of what they feed on are large rodents like giant mole rats. And how they hunt them is using super sensitive hearing and using stealth and lightning quick reactions where they leap forward and grab an unsuspecting rodent from its burrow. Very, very different hunting technique to their close cousin, the grey wolf. But, unfortunately, over the last few decades, these animals have been under a tremendous pressure. They've been suffering from hunting, habitat loss, and most recently from disease. It's now meant that there's probably less than 500 individuals left in the wild, so they are teetering on the edge. Of course, a few decades ago, Ethiopian wolves were blamed for livestock predation and hunted by local people, but that has since been stopped because it was proven the wolves were not responsible. But the main threat to these wolves is habitat loss, because Ethiopia's human population is expanding at a rapid rate. And now, all those people now need more space to live and to grow their food. And as people take over the land for farming, that's leaving less and less space for the Ethiopian wolves to live and raise their own pups. And a lot of them are being pushed into the highest mountain ranges of Ethiopia. But these wolves are now not just threatened by the loss of their habitat. In fact, people in Ethiopia, like many people around the world, keep dogs. And unfortunately, pet dogs in Ethiopia have one of the highest rates of rabies in the world, a disease that affects all members of the canine family and unfortunately is fatal. And the wolves easily catch rabies when they come into contact with pet or stray dogs. But people are doing something about it. With vaccinations being given to the local dogs to prevent the spread of rabies to the Ethiopian wolves, and efforts are gradually being made to preserve the habitat they live in, as well as talks with local people to learn to coexist with these wolves. So hopefully in 30 years' time this population could increase from 500. Of course, this is their range. As you can see, they're only found here in Ethiopia. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you all is the largest reptile in Africa. It is the Nile crocodile. Now, Nile crocodiles are the largest reptiles in Africa. In fact, a fully grown male can be about 6 meters long and weigh 1/4 of a ton. They also have 70 to 78 curved cone-shaped teeth and a bite like a dinosaur. In fact, in Africa, the name crocodile means lizard of the Nile, as they are the closest thing we have to a dinosaur, and they've been around on the planet unchanged for millions of years. Why? Because they are the ultimate killing machines. But I mean, I'll get to that bit later, because as you can see here, there's a mother crocodile with young, and crocodiles always have a reputation as being cold, hard dinosaurs or mindless killing machines. But as you can see here, they are not that at all. In fact, they are very protective and devoted mothers, even carrying their babies in their mouths. And they're willing to put their lives on the line to defend their eggs and their hatchlings from predators. So they are anything but mindless killers. And another thing about crocodiles is how they hunt, because in the Mara River in East Africa, the crocodiles there will wait for about a year for an annual event, which they wait for many years. All the time. It's the wildebeest migration, where herds of wildebeest are on their never-ending quest for fresh pastures. And of course, for the crocodiles, that is a big event, because they either come down to the river to cross, well, they either cross the river or they come down to drink. And the crocodiles also actually have special sensors along their jaws that can detect the vibrations of wildebeest either drinking at the water's edge or quite often a panicky, struggling animal. And they can detect those vibrations in the water, and even a big male crocodile that could weigh 1/4 of a ton could completely hide itself in about 30 centimeters of water. And they can stay underwater for over 3 hours. And they do that by rationing the oxygen in their blood and slowing their heartbeat from 40 beats a minute to just 3 beats a minute. And they can then wait for the perfect chance to attack. Then with a sweep of their muscular tail, they leap out of the water and they shut their eyes to protect them. But once they've got a hold of prey, they will grab onto it, biting down with over 2 tons of pressure, and then they will drag their prey back into the water. And quite often they will perform a death roll where they will hold on to their prey and then roll and roll and roll until it drowns. But also, right here, as you can see, crocodiles are all together, and that's when, because the crocodiles here, when they've made a kill, they actually show